Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, lovely people. This is Marie Alessi with the lovely Doug Noll for yet another Upspiral Grief interview. And I'm really excited about this one because Doug is doing something quite differently. Very often we hear a grief story here in Loving Love After Loss. And then people who have an Upspiral story to tell around this. And I love that. And we have more and more people come to share around that. And then Doug came in with something slightly different. And I'm like, I really feel that our audience would absolutely benefit from that. I think we were connected via LinkedIn. However, I'm just glad that you're here. Doug, would you do us the honor to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Thank you, Marie. Well, of course, my name is Doug Noll. I'm a lawyer turned peacemaker. And I was a practicing trial lawyer in California for 22 years. In mid-career, went back to school and earned my master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies, and ultimately left the practice of law in 2000 to become a peacemaker and a mediator. And it's been an amazing journey since that time. Today, I specialize in teaching people how to become emotionally competent, teaching people how to de-escalate strong emotions in 90 seconds or less, and working in high conflict situations, such as family business conflicts or partnership disputes, where wealth is at stake and the emotions are very high.
Yeah.
I work in a wide variety of environments, from maximum security prisons, where I teach life inmates to become peacemakers and mediators to stop prison violence, to the Congressional Budget Office, where I've trained senior analysts how to de-escalate members of Congress.
I believe everybody can see now why I had to bring you on camera just with this short introduction. And I can't wait to unpack that a little bit further with you and actually explain and go into a bit more detail what that actually means in the real life, in the real world for us. And before we go there, I would like to actually go back quite a bit further, because you have your own grief story, and you said you were happy to share that with us. And maybe then I'd like to have our audience come on that path with you, would let you to do what you do today. And you said it's not directly related, but maybe there was a good reason for that. Would you mind sharing that background a little bit more?
Yes, I recall being home in Southern California. I live in Central California, in the real California, in the Sierra. But my parents at that time lived in Southern California, and we had gathered for an Easter gathering. And I will never forget that day when sitting in the living room with my wife and my third brother, Tim, and his wife, and he told me he had AIDS. And I knew that was a death sentence. And that was a huge shock to me. Everybody else in the family knew except me. I don't know why they kept it from me, but I guess Tim wanted to tell me directly. And I cried a lot that day and afterwards. And for the next 6 months, that was in April, I think. And for the next 6 months, I would go to, he lived in New York and Connecticut, and I would travel there and visit with him and spend time with him. He'd come out to California with his wife and spend time with us. And you know, it was tough. And finally he passed. I saw him a week before he passed in New York, and it was devastating to me. I'd never really had anybody close to me pass before. And, you know, of course, it's a reminder of your own mortality, but also, you know, you feel like something's been ripped away, and we've all experienced this. And the way it changed me was, up until that time, I think I was 41 years old. I had been a really pretty happy guy, had a very creative life, and had done a lot of fun things, you know, and when this happened, it changed me, and I grew up in many ways. It was a maturation process. And I became a lot quieter and more introspective, more I don't know, sort of the joy of life was taken out of me. Not entirely, but my interests began to shift. And I think, I mean, there were a lot of things going on in my life at that time that were beginning to shift me in my spiritual practice, my martial arts training, a lot of things were pushing me towards becoming a peacemaker. I didn't know it at the time, but a lot of things were pushing me towards becoming a peacemaker. And I think that Tim's death was probably one of those things that kicked me hard, so that I became a little more serious. Not that I wasn't serious before as a trial lawyer, but you started to focus on what's really important.
Yeah.
And
I think that a lot of people can relate to that maturity process, where like all of a sudden there's this a fork in the road that we often refer to, this adversity that completely changes your life. And people do grow up. I watched it in my sons, they were 8 and 10 when my husband died, and the way they grew up, it was such a fast forward process. And at the same time, I think there's such an importance, no matter what age we are at when we lose a loved one, to really keep the focus on, so what do I do with that now? What is the best thing that I could do with that for myself, for my family, for the world? And I think I can relate to that a lot, that becoming more serious. Yet what came out of that you said, okay, I need to do something with that? When did you have that realization that to become a peacemaker? It sounds so easy, so beautiful. So, but what can we understand under becoming a peacemaker? Can you explain a little bit more about that process and what came out of that?
The shift really happened about 4 or 5 years later. And I was in a courtroom trying a case and cross-examining somebody, and I thought, what the heck am I doing in here?
Wow.
And I didn't know I didn't know. And after that trial, I had a vacation planned, a river trip with a bunch of friends, and I spent 10 days on my whitewater raft thinking about how many people I'd served as a trial lawyer, and could only come up with a couple of people that I'd really served. And I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. But I didn't know what I was going to do. And after that trip, I was driving down out of the mountains to my office, and I heard a public service announcement for a new master's degree in peacemaking and conflict studies being offered at Fresno Pacific University, which is one of the West Coast Mennonite universities. And I enrolled. And for 3 years, I was a full-time graduate student, a 3/4 time law professor, and a full-time trial lawyer. And that completely changed my life. But what I learned from my mentors, who were all geniuses, about human conflict and the difficulty of making peace, and what peace is and what it isn't, and what kind of things you can do, interventions you can do to help people. And it really broadened my knowledge of conflict hugely. So much so that in 2000, I left right after I finished my master's degree, I left the practice of law and became a full-time mediator and peacemaker. Yeah, it sounds really sexy, but as I tell my students, and I have been training lifers in prison for 13 years. And as I tell all them, it's the hardest work a human being can ever be called to do. Yeah.
And what a calling it was for you. This is a really, really beautiful story. And thank you so much for sharing that. How did your family react to that when all of a sudden you left law within a radio call, basically, call from the radio, and then you just left and went into studying? Sorry?
Everybody was surprised, but not surprised. They couldn't understand why I was walking away from $10 million in a very successful trial practice, and something so radically different that no one would have ever conceived Doug Noll doing something like that. But I didn't care. I mean, I knew it was the right call, and it turned out I was right. It was the best decision that I've ever made in my life around business and professional development. And I help more people in a week today than I helped in 22 years as a trial lawyer.
I love that you had that moment on while you were water rafting and thinking about how many people did it actually help, and what you do now is just incredible. So tell us a little bit what happened after you graduated, after you finished. How did you go from studying to actually doing the work that you do now? That's quite a path, working in prison and offering your services there. It's incredible.
Right. The biggest problem that I had in becoming a peacemaker was dealing with angry, emotional, upset people. Nothing that my teachers had for me worked. Everybody was using those old I statements, active listening stuff from Thomas Gordon in the 1950s, which has no science to support it and is completely ineffective. And Marshall Rosenberg's, I think, this is my opinion, I don't have any evidence to support it, but as I examined Thomas Gordon's work and Marshall Rosenberg's work in nonviolent communication, it looks to me like Rosenberg just rebranded what Gordon was doing and called it nonviolent communication. And it's equally ineffective when you're dealing with intense situations. So I was in a mediation in 2005 and my back was up against the wall, and the thought came to me, listen to the emotions.
Yeah.
And I had the people, instead of listening to the words and the stories, I had them listen to each other's emotions and tell each other what they were feeling. And it was like a miracle. They calmed down and the case resolved very rapidly. And it was phenomenal what happened. And then 2 years later, I knew what I'd done, so I started practicing it, using it, and I saw it happen in other cases. And then 2 years later, Matthew Lieberman's lab published a brain scanning study that showed why this process called affect labeling works, what's really going on in the brain. And so now I had the science to support the practice. And I began teaching it around the world. In those days, it was pretty rudimentary. Today, it's quite polished. And that led to the Prison of Peace Project in 2010 with my colleague Laurel Coffer. And we started training 15 women serving life sentences in the largest, most violent women's prison in the world, which was Valley State Prison for Women in Chowchilla, California, and train them how to become peacemakers and mediators and completely transform their lives in the prison. And that's how the prison project started. And
sorry to interrupt you here quickly, but how did that get started? How did you come from being, with your back up against the wall in a mediation and having this epiphany, may I say, to simply listening to their emotions, which is, it is really simple, but it is important to have that epiphany. It is important to recognize that, and then teaching it, and then taking it to prison. There's like, how on earth did you make that bridge? And did you come up with this, hey, let's bring that into the most violent place on earth, basically?
Well, I received a lot of, you're right, it was an epiphany, and it was an epiphany that was, in 2 years, was backed by science, but I was getting a lot of pushback and skepticism because we live in a society that finds emotions to be evil and manipulative and, nothing but pejoratives for emotions. And of course, we've been fed a lie for 4,000 years that what makes human beings human is rationality and reasoning. And neuroscience establishes beyond question that's just not true. We are emotional beings. We're 98% emotional and only 2% rational. But anyways, in August of 2009, my colleague Laurel Coffer received a letter from a woman in that prison serving a life sentence without possibility of parole, asking if Laurel would come in and train them how to be mediators. And Laurel and I were both very well-known mediator trainers and teachers. And Laurel called me and read the letter to me and said, what do you think? I said, I think we should do this. And so we responded to the request. It took us 6 months to get through the prison bureaucracy, but we began training our first women in April of 2010. And today, Prison of Peace is in 30 prisons around the world. We were shut down from programming because of the pandemic, but we took the time and the money and filmed our entire curriculum. And now we can, it's a 40-hour training spread over a year that can be taught in any prison in the world because we can subtitle everything in any language. Incredible. And we have 14 prisons in Greece. We have a startup in Nairobi, a startup in Northern Italy. We have a startup, and we're going to do a women's prison in Denmark. We've got 15 or 20 prisons in California. We're in the Connecticut prison system. So just beginning to grow, and we expect the growth to be exponential over the next 5 years. And
I'm just
the results are
in complete awe, can I just say. It is just, you say it so nonchalant, as in, this is what we did, but the effect this has around the world is just such an incredible ripple effect. And I just want to say thank you so much for the work you do. I really feel so honored to be sitting here with you. This is absolutely mind-blowing. It's really beautiful what you do here, and I just needed to say that.
Thanks. The cool thing is we've trained over 6,000 inmates that have been released on parole in California, all of them serving long-term sentences. Not one of them has reoffended. We have zero reports of recidivism from any of our students. Yeah. So it's absolutely incredible. Yeah. Powerful, very powerful. Yeah. And So the Prison of Peace was, of course, a huge testing ground for my listening skills. And we just have story after story after story of how learning how to listen to emotions transforms not only the listener, not only the speaker who's having the emotional moment, but also the listener. It reprograms our brains in really positive and powerful ways. And now I'm teaching administrators and principals and teachers how to de-escalate angry parents and students. I'm really interested in that area, teaching young parents how to listen their children into existence and stop the emotional abuse of emotional invalidation, and just trying to get this information out to as many people as possible because it is so powerful and foundational.
I think I'm just sitting here thinking, how on earth do you prioritize that? Because, you know, with the work that I do, there's more and more projects that line up for me where people have also asked me, you know, to come and teach that in schools because none of the teachers are trained in how to actually deal with grief, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sometimes sitting here going like, oh, where do I even start, you know? And with your work that has gone so global already, you know, how do you prioritize where to start? There are countless projects where the work that you do is so needed because it can really be applied to any area in life.
It's interesting. I go where I'm called. I go where people are willing to listen to me. There are a lot of people that don't want to listen to me. There are a lot of people who are afraid of emotions and don't want to become emotionally competent, and they don't want to go through that growth process that you know happens when you become a master of your emotions. And so I just go where I'm called. I prioritize where the interest is. And 3 weeks ago, I was in Indianapolis, Indiana, training 30 or 40 school principals how to de-escalate angry parents and teachers. You know,
I mean, love it.
So wherever I go, I get calls from people and we talk. Next year, I'll be working with the Federal Ombudsman Office in Canada for Veterans Affairs and teaching all their ombuds people how to de-escalate angry veterans who are calling in for veterans services. So you just go wherever you're called. And it's not like I have so many opportunities to teach and train that I have to pick and choose. I don't. Interesting.
Wow. You would think though, like, because when you think where it can be applied, it's just really mind-blowing. I want to pick you up on one term that you just used because we are so accustomed to the term emotional intelligence. You know, it's thrown around quite often these days, and I'm glad it is because it's such an important thing for us to not just look at our IQ, but also our EQ. And I'm also referring to Stephanie Pinto, actually, who's a very growing and upcoming leader in the emotional intelligence for children. She's got her group, and I also had her here in an interview about a year ago, maybe. And I love the work that she does, and it's just so amazing to watch the ripple effect that has when we teach those things, but anything, in relations to emotions. And you just use the term emotional confidence. Can you just dig a little bit deep on that, how we can understand emotional competence? It sounds pretty self-explaining, but can you explain that a little bit more to us?
Sure. First of all, you can't learn emotional intelligence. And anybody that says they teach emotional intelligence does not understand what they're doing. Emotional intelligence was a term coined by Meyer and Salovey back in the early 1990s. It was picked up and turned into a best-selling book by a guy who was a New York Times science author. I had a PhD in psychology, and he commercialized it. And now everybody and their uncle goes around talking about, I can teach you to be emotionally intelligent. It's like me telling you, Marie, I can teach you IQ. I can, because emotional intelligence, it's a form of social intelligence. It's a measurement. It's an assessment. It's not a skill. The skills that it measures are emotional competencies. And there are 3 fundamental competencies: emotional self-awareness, emotional self-regulation, and cognitive empathy. What I teach is cognitive empathy. It's a process called affect labeling. And when you learn how to label and reflect somebody else's emotions, you automatically build your own emotional self-awareness and emotional self-regulation. So you automatically become emotionally competent as you learn the process of listening to and reflecting back somebody else's emotions. And it's quite powerful, and it doesn't take long. It takes most people 4 to 6 weeks to master these skills, and it completely changes their lives.
I'm so glad I asked now. So Can I just want to see if I need to correct myself here, because I asked you about emotional confidence, but did you say competence? I just want to make sure if I got that right.
It's emotional competence, three basic skills: self-awareness,
Yeah.
self-regulation, and cognitive empathy.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm glad I asked.
Yeah, we teach cognitive empathy, and all the other skills flow from that.
Yeah.
It makes it so easy.
I'm absolutely blown away. Is like, how, if anybody's listening to this and like, I want to do this, I want to learn this, how can people actually, is there a course that you have online? Is there something where people can go?
Yeah,
Give us a bit of a
I created a
direction
web
here.
page for everybody who's listening, and the URL for the web page is dougnoll.co/upspiralgrief, all one word. Doug Noll,
Oh, wow.
DOGNOL.co/upspiralgrief. And on that page,
I can't believe you'd use that upspiral grief as well. We've got that in common. I love it.
and on that page, you'll find you can get a free ebook that talks about all these skills. You can buy a copy of my 4th book, De-Escalate. You can buy a video course on how to de-escalate an angry person, and you can buy my emotional competency courses on how
and don't you worry, for all the listeners, we'll be sharing all the links in the comments below, so you don't have to worry about finding that.
I wanted to talk about another project that I'm just starting, because this might be of interest to everybody. It's called my Difficult Conversations Project. Everybody has a difficult conversation they have to have, and they avoid the conversation because of fear. And what I'm testing is how to have a difficult conversation with another person, with me facilitating it. And so the deal is my facilitation of your difficult conversation is free, but I'm going to live stream it because I want the world to watch and see how these skills work. And so basically you go to my web page, which I'll give in a minute. And if you've got a partner or a person that agrees to have a difficult conversation with me, you sign up, and for an hour we'll be on Zoom, and I will provide a very safe, emotionally safe environment and a process for you to have that difficult conversation that you need to have, that you're avoiding, that's causing you a lot of stress and anxiety. And it could be with your parents, or a parent with an adult child, or a teenager, or it could be with your intimate partner. It could be with a friend. It could be with anybody, and it could be about anything. And this is really the highest calling of the peacemaker, is for me to be able to work with people who need to have a difficult conversation, and I will facilitate the conversation in a way that will get the conversation done, and everybody will grow from it and feel really good about it when it's over with. And that page also on my website is dougnoll.com, not co, but com, com/lp/difficult-conversations. It's free.
We will be sharing that link too.
It's an absolutely free service by me. Obviously, I can't do many of them. So if you get on and the website and try to calendar, and you got to wait a little while, well, I have other things to do too. And this is free, so I've got to be careful how much free I give. But we'll do it on Zoom. We will probably live stream it. If not, then I'll record it and then live stream it through a platform I use. And it'll be, I'm really excited about this project. I've done a couple already, and it's really powerful. Really
Can
exciting.
I ask you, please? I just think about this. I'm very lucky that I can't think of any conversation that I need to have at the moment that is confronting. Yet I'm just thinking how hard that would be for people when there's a confrontational conversation to be had, to then let that be live streamed. And I think the value that you offer here is incredible. Yet what could you say to people that are sitting here watching this thinking, I really need to have this, but how on earth do I convince the other person, or how would I myself be open to have the whole world watch this? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Well, first of all, my experience is that whether you're videoed or not, that all goes away once you get in the process. The question is, do you want to be participate in a process where we can teach the world that your particular problem is one that many other people share, and if other people can watch you solve your problem with me, that gives them hope to solve their own problems.
I love that.
Lift the cloak of confidentiality off of this, so people can really see real people with real problems,
vulnerability behind it,
solving their problems and having this difficult conversation in less than 60 minutes. And the more people that see that, the more people will have hope and see that, hey, I can do this. I can have peace. I can have this difficult conversation. So that's the motivation. The other part of it is sort of a little more ego. Think of it as being on a mini reality TV show, because that's really what it's going to be. And so you get to star on your own TV show, which is kind of fun. If you need to talk another person into it, have them go to the webpage, dougnoll.com/lp/difficult-conversations. And I explain the whole process, or I even have a demo. I mean, I actually have an excerpt of a difficult conversation I did with a young couple that shows you exactly what it looks like. And so you can make a decision. Obviously, both sides have to agree.
Yeah.
But if you want, your choice is this: go in avoidance for the rest of your life and carry all the stress and anxiety and upset over not having that conversation.
Yeah.
Or have the difficult conversation and get it past you. And come out stronger and with a stronger relationship and stronger yourself with more resiliency and capacity.
Yeah. I actually want to share something here quickly without outing the other person here, because it just reminded me of a conversation that I just had literally a week or two ago. And it was very confronting for me. And it was a conversation that I knew I had to have, because otherwise I'd be confronted with that same topic literally on a daily basis. And most people that know me would consider me as a very confident person. Yet when it comes to a conversation like that, it is confronting for anyone, no matter how confident you are or not. And it was very confronting for me. I remember I was actually shaking. I was, heart pounding and everything. And I thought, if I don't address this, it will follow me every single day. So I literally did it, for both purposes. I love having peace and harmony around me. It's a very huge value for me to have peace and quiet and harmony around me. And also for very selfish reasons that I didn't want to be confronted with that on a daily basis. So I faced it front on, and I literally went into, I went in with the intention, I put that on a table. I just want this to be solved for everyone. I don't want to be avoiding this. I know it's confronting, and it's confronting for me too. And that's how I started the conversation. And I thought, by putting that out there, I make myself vulnerable, and I also explain how uncomfortable this is for me, not just for the other person. And it was literally resolved, which I'm so happy about, because I feel there's this weight off my shoulder. And I think often we don't think about the ripple effect it has on our lives for a really long time to come if we don't solve it now. We often don't think about that. We just drag it on day by day, or it stays in the background, or we try to push it away, yet it follows us. It doesn't go away. It's like, if you have like a hurt somewhere in your body and you keep ignoring it, it's not going to go away. You might learn to not pay attention to it, but eventually the pain will come out so badly, and often worse than if you address it correctly and straight away. So I'm a very big believer in it, yet it is a confrontation. And I think
the problem, Marie, is nobody, unless you're a professional like I am and have spent decades studying human conflict and understand the dynamics of what goes in the brain, we don't have the skills or the tools to deal with confrontation and strong emotions. We tend to run from them because they're painful and they're anxiety producing and they're scary. Once you learn what I teach, then all that goes away. There's no more fear around emotions at all. And any angry person can come up to you and be spitting in your face, and you'll be calm as a cucumber. You'll always maintain your composure and always have compassion, but it's learning the skills that's the trick. So I teach the skills, but in this difficult conversations project, I want to demonstrate the skills as well, because I think a picture is worth 1,000 words. Yeah. And I guarantee,
Doug, if you don't, sorry.
I was going to say, I guarantee every conversation will work out. 100% success rate. I expect, I have never seen failure with this. So
I love it. I absolutely love this. And it sounds really like something that everybody needs. And if you don't mind, Doug, I'd like to ask you kindly if maybe I can have a tiny little teaching moment with you here live on camera, because my approach that I usually use with anger, and I'd be more than happy for you to say, no, there is a better way, and I'm so open to learning it. So far, I have approached anger as I used to call it, or I do call it, a cover-up emotion. There's usually something underneath that. There's usually something like grief or frustration or sadness or deep disappointment or whatever there is that made you, and anger is the way how we express it, how it comes out, how it's easier to express the emotion that's actually underneath Am I on the right path here, or is there any
You are.
better way that you would like to share here with us?
The secret to all of this is it's a 3-step process. Ignore the words, read
Yeah.
the emotions, and reflect back the emotions with a you statement.
I love it.
And then what you do is I teach people how to structure emotional data so they can make sense of it and access it. And you do this by thinking of emotional layers.
Mhm.
And you're right, anger is a presenting emotion, but typically
Mm.
there are much deeper emotions underneath it.
Yeah.
The other thing that people don't realize is that emotions come in clusters.
Mm.
So you never have just one emotion. You usually have
Mhm.
6 or 7 emotions all at once in various degrees of intensity.
Yeah.
And when we affect label, or when I reflect back people's emotions, what the brain scanning studies show is that the emotional centers of the brain are inhibited, and at the same time, the right ventral lateral prefrontal cortex, our
Mhm.
executive function, is activated, so that now we can gain control of ourselves.
Yeah.
And the whole process takes about 90 seconds.
Mhm.
That's
Wow.
why the title of my last book is De-Escalate: How to Calm a Person in 90 Seconds or Less.
Yeah.
And it works every time.
I will surely buy that book. I can't wait to read it. I mean, it's yeah, I'll definitely
Yeah.
let you know.
Every brain is hardwired this way. Every
Mm.
brain, every human brain is hardwired this way. And I've had people work in Asian cultures, European
Mhm.
cultures, you name it, and
Yeah.
Hispanic cultures. It all works. It works on every brain because that's the way we're hardwired, and it all happens unconsciously. That's the
Yeah.
other.
That
So
would be a really interesting conversation to have as well. And I know we're running out of time here, but just from a cultural perspective, because I just had this conversation with somebody the other day about how different cultures react so differently with emotions. And I had a very personal experience at a doctor the other day, and I literally felt so unheard.
right,
And I actually got really angry, and that is an emotion that I rarely feel these days anymore. And I could feel it, and I was like, wow. And it was because I felt unseen and
of
unheard
course,
in my emotion.
well,
And I thought, I haven't felt angry in such a long time. I can't even remember. And it
right.
really came up so clearly where I felt like, yeah, anyway, it's just
Well,
really interesting. And it
here's
was such a cultural clash there as well, where I thought that's very interesting to look at that from a cultural perspective.
I understand that, first of all, we're not born with emotions. They're
Mm.
culturally created in our brains, and emotions are what define culture, not race or ethnicity or anything else.
Yeah.
And there are different words for emotions, for example,
Mm.
here in North America than exist in Finland or Czechoslovakia or in any of
Mhm.
the thousands of Asian cultures. Every culture has its own definition of what emotions are, its
Yeah.
own vocabulary of emotions.
Yeah.
And those emotions are vary by culture. So
Mhm.
that one of the reasons we have a culture clash, for example, which you experience, is that person's
Mm.
emotional categorization is different than an Australian or
Yeah.
American
Yeah.
set of emotions. And so you absolutely can't communicate because your emotional language is completely different, because you have different emotions have different salience and different importance. And
Yeah.
that's how we get into a lot of these conflicts, especially around cultural conflicts. It's emotions are very
Wow.
different. But the trick is to learn how to deal with that and how to deal with
Mm.
your own when you get upset. How do you calm yourself down? And you do that
Yeah.
through self-affect labeling.
It comes back to the self-regulation part. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and but it's very easy to learn. That you don't have to go
Mm.
off and have therapy for 50 years to figure this stuff out. It
Yeah.
really, you can learn this very quickly, 4 to 6 weeks, if you practice 3 times a week. In four
I
to
love
six
it.
weeks, life will be completely.
I'm
And all
very,
fights.
very intrigued.
Yeah, the promise I make is and what would it be like to end all fights and arguments forever in your life? Never
Mm.
ever have another fight or argument with anybody ever in your life. I can teach you how to do that.
I love it. Doug, I feel I could sit with you here for at least another hour, if not longer, because I feel like we've only just started a conversation, yet we are at the end of our interview time now. So I really would love to share all the links that you've just named. We will be sharing that in the comment section below. So rest assured, you don't have to worry about if you missed that. We will share all of the links for the books, the trainings, your website, how people can get in touch with you, how people can have that conversation live on camera to de-escalate, an argument they have. So I cannot thank you enough for being here. I feel so honored to have shared this time with you. And before we go, is there any last message that you would like to share, that you'd like to bring across for the audience here today?
Well, I like to leave people with this idea that every time that you listen another person into existence, by listening to and reflecting your emotions, you're throwing a little pebble of peace into the pond.
I love it.
And it starts a ripple. And the ripple goes in places you could never imagine. But what would imagine if we had hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of people throwing that little pebble of peace into the pond every time they listened another person into existence, and they did that every day? How different would our world be? And this is something that's absolutely free to give, costs you nothing, and the payback to you is huge.
I can feel your ripple in my life already. So I really want to thank you for being here today, Doug. And yeah, everybody else for listening, thank you so much for being here. And as I said, we will be sharing the links. You have a beautiful day. Thank you so much for being here. This is Doug and Marie signing off. Bye for now.